Morality is a funny thing. So is punctuality. For example, I was meant to get this video out about 3 weeks ago, but then again, here we are now. So Invincible season 3 starts out looking at Cecil in a different way. And sorry, my wife's making dinner for the first time in 4 years. And Invincible season 3 starts with Mark being at the pinnacle of morality and viewing Cecil's actions as completely immoral. But as time goes on, all of his actions are challenged and looked at in new light as new characters are introduced and new perspectives. First off, let's talk about morality. What is it? According to study.com, morality is the human attempt to define what is right and wrong about our actions and thoughts, and what is good and bad about our being who we are. Wow, cool. Ethics Unwrapped says morals are prevailing standards of behavior that enables people to live cooperatively in groups. So, in essence, that means whatever society says acceptable is right is indeed right. So, by that logic, the average Viltrumite is the pinnacle of morality amongst his peers. To that end, I want to explore some differing perspectives and the characters attached to them and their individual effects on Mark. So, without further ado, now I already made a video on Cecil when I was riding the wave of Cecil was right, but I made an absolute crucial error of comparing him to the wrong person. So I was going through a bit of a buzz and inside job, which, by the way, watch that, and it kind of encompassed a lot of my life. Just like after I came back from Croatia, I had a bit of an addiction to olive oil, which I'm still trying to fund that crippling addiction to. Anyway, I compared him to Ron Ridley when Waller and Batman comparisons were right there. You fucking bell end. After carefully reviewing the events that caused Mark and Cecil's fallout, Mark and the world's heroes are at the mercy of Tim Waltz's dad when Cecil sends Darkwing and the fucking cavalry. Mark instantly reacts with shock and aggression towards the Reanimen and Darkwing, despite just being saved. Mark then immediately flees to Cecil to confront him, and, well, it then goes down. This incident and the ensuing fight with the Reanimen and Cecil begins to shape Mark's perspective of everything moving forward. For example, Cecil was someone Mark trusted, and he trusted him a lot. Even though Mark would rebel against him and disregard what he had to say and do his own thing, he would still have a lot of time for Cecil and would still respect him enough so that when Cecil was working with people like Sinclair and Darkwing, that heavily affected him. Also, in the ensuing fight, I'd like to think that Rex breaking the rules and going to help his friend also did help Invincible. And let's remember that Mark didn't see Cecil's backstory where he went through all that growth within the prison and dealing with the Order of the Flying Fist and the origin of a scar and becoming the head of the GDA and learning about you can be the good guy or the guy that saves the world. He didn't know all that. He also didn't know that Cecil was calling off his Rihanna men as Rudy was able to turn the signal off. So for Mark, all he sees is Cecil is working with DA Sinclair and then he sets his Rihanna men on him. From his perspective, you'd probably be pissed off too. But as the series goes on, I think Mark starts to see where Cecil is truly coming from. Because by the end of the season, Mark not only is willing to be in the same room as Cecil, he also calls out to him for help. Now, this is before Cecil starts his 8 Mile routine and shows Mark Conquest's body. Mark and Cecil at this point are beginning to show signs of truly repairing the relationship, but we'll see how long that lasts. Also, wouldn't it have made more sense to use Conquest and just turn him into Reaniman? Like, yeah, intel's really valuable, but that's really dropping the ball. And again, we've got a lot of DNA right now, and I know there's two big blue men that were working on cloning anything. Now, I'm sure there's also a strange man that lived in a tube for many years that is part of the Guardians of the Globe again. I'm sure he might be able to figure out their research and be able to clone you several conquests and put the brains of, I don't know, someone like Donald or Cecil or anything into them, so that way you've got a literal army of conquests. I mean, that might be an idea. Just saying. If you can't make him a Reaniman, also why aren't we making more things a Reaniman? Why aren't the Mauler twins Reanimen right now? Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. Seeing as this video is about morality, I may as well tell you that Cecil most closely embodies consequentialism. I know you've probably not heard that word before. See, to be honest with you, before I started researching this video, I'd never heard that word before. Consequentialism is an ethical theory that judges whether or not something is right by the consequences it has. Now, I know everyone's watching has most definitely heard the phrase, do the ends justify the means? That pretty much embodies Cecil all the way through. As you heard from his flashback, after his time in prison, his former boss said to him, you can either be the good guy or the guy that saves the world. That is pretty much do the ends justify the means. Now, it isn't just in season 3 that you've seen this type of side of Cecil come out. Also, bear in mind in the finale that Cecil sent Hail Mary after Omni-Man, and it was beginning to look like it was going to kill Mark as well as Omni-Man, and Cecil refused to turn the monster off, even though his mum was begging him to do it. Mark's mum, and that's when he refused and said he hates him too. This is very much a sign that this guy is taking the side of the greater good way more seriously than he would say his own personal feelings on a subject, bolstered further by the fact he says he hates himself too. Now, Cecil's actions definitely serve as kind of a wake up call towards Mark, in that they're living in a world that is relentless and incredibly violent, and Cecil has been living in that world and fully understands what is at stake. Mark, I don't believe, is there yet, even though he's seen more so what's coming. However, this does kind of open the door for Mark to realize that when you're fighting these types of enemies, you've got to leave your morals at the front door. Later in the series, Mark is faced with his actions in the worst possible way. This goes to show that even in times of crisis, that any action you take, including doing nothing, can have severe consequences. Now, we're introduced to Powerplex's side of the story when we meet him, and from his point of view, he killed his sister and his niece with help of his dad. And when you first meet him, yeah, it certainly looks that way. As Mark is holding the severed arm of his sister before fucking off with his dad. But as we learn more about Scott Duvall, who is Powerplex, by the way, the less sense it starts to make. Now, Powerplex has very much got a absolutism form of morality when it comes to revenge, in which I mean there's absolutely zero case for any nuance, and he's very much on a one-way trip to wrecking everything he still has. As we know more about Scott, we find out that he's actually an employee at the GDA working on all manner of tech, and he has access to all the videos of Mark during the Chicago incident with his dad. And you can even see Mark is blatantly trying to fight his dad back as he's given the subway treatment. Scott, however, is still unfazed by this and carries on with his mission of trying to do whatever he can to get revenge on Invincible. Now, this is quite bizarre because you can see in this exact moment that he's witnessing something terrible happen to Mark. So maybe if that happened, perhaps everything else wasn't his choice either. But this goes to show how blinded this guy is in his revenge quest. If it isn't obvious enough already, Perplex basically serves as an exact mirror to Invincible. When you see them together in the picture above, you can basically see that their color schemes are pretty much just opposite. The only thing that's really different about them is the fact that Mark partially covers his face, whereas Scott does not, and the color schemes being opposite. I think if Mark was to go down the way he was going without any room for nuance, he was pretty much headed in the same direction as Perplex. gradually stepping over boundary by boundary until he would affect the ones he cares about. Which I know I wasn't the only one that 100% knew that Scott was going to end up accidentally killing his family if he kept chasing Invincible. Also, it needs to be said that after their first fight, after his fight with Atom Eve, and Scott realized he wasn't really getting anywhere, Scott chose to kidnap his own family and put them in that position. That wasn't Mark at all. And yet Scott still blames Invincible for everything. This should tell you how far gone this guy actually is. Also, he's probably not the brightest bulb in the box, but anyhow, it's interesting as well how Paraplex's powers work, in that if you keep attacking him and fighting him, it's just going to make him stronger. But if you embrace him and accept him, then his power is diminished and he loses all his strength. Now, I may not be a smart man, but you can use this as a bit of an allegory to describe how Mark should deal with his problems. You can't always fight them. You can't always attack them. You can't always use force. Sometimes you just have to accept what's happening, and that will take its power away. A quick one before I fully dive into this. I don't know if anybody else noticed that in episode 1 or 2, when Dropkick and Fightmaster are stealing the Declaration of Independence, Immortal reacts to it in the background. You hear him react with surprise. And you later find out that the Declaration of Independence was rumored to have some kind of weakness of the king, which you find out is the Immortal. Immortal's pretty much a meme right now, because as the guy lives to talk a big game, he also has the survival attributes of Kenny McCormick. In that he's been in about 6 fights in this show and lost 7 of them. Anyway, I'm going to have his back for a bit before I shit on him further. When we first meet the Immortal, he's a team leader of an actual effective Guardians of the Globe team, going out and actually getting it done. Then he gets killed, then resurrected. Then you see this guy's Abe Lincoln. Then he dies again, and repeat. Now, hear me out. I think there's a few reasons for this cycle. In an enraged state, Immortal's already proved he can be more than a handful for Omni-Man. Fucking Omni-Man of all people. He's also capable of swallowing his pride and agreeing to work with Invincible, like what happened on Mars, to achieve the common goal. He's also went toe to toe with Goggleless Mark variant, which I can only assume happened on day 1 and continued all the way into day 2 or 3 until he once again died. I'm definitely going to show my age here. Immortal kind of reminds me of that guy in Spartacus that all the other gladiators shit on. Yet, when you see the guy in action against Legionnaires, he absolutely batters them. Now, this dude is weak compared to all the other gladiators. However, the guy is absolutely harder than a coffin nail. Now, I think that's Immortal. Basically, he is in a room full of gods, and he's able to compete with them. Yes, he gets his arse kicked every time, but just think of the competition he's doing. This guy wakes up every day on veteran difficulty. One last point on this part of Immortal. I also reckon that after dying horrifically many times, seeing all his friends get killed in front of him and living as long as he has, he's kind of showing the signs of being pretty burnt out, which, as he said to Cecil after Kate's death, he was already considering moving on. Despite all this, he still fights, even when it's clear he's massively outmatched. Now, I think that's pretty admirable.
Because that's what heroes do.
Part I want to bring up is Immortal's future self. Now, Immortal's current self, he is very much follows the deontology in the way that rules are put in place for a reason and our morality comes from them. Him in the future, he's kind of done a full heel turn and is a violent dictator that is doing everything that he physically can to bring Invincible back so we can finally put him to rest, not excluding torture, mass murder, and large amounts of tyranny. Now, I want to discuss something that when Dropkick and Fightmaster appear at Invincible and at Maeve's dinner, the first thing Invincible says is, "I'll throw you two in prison." That's pretty interesting. That's pretty authoritarian, if you ask me. Like, Dropkick and Fightmaster have come from a future version of Earth. You know nothing about them, and that's his first instinct. That does sound pretty absolutist right there. Then, when Mark finally agrees to head into the future with them, and you meet the king, you realize it's Immortal. Invincible refuses to do anything about it, despite Immortal straight up begging him to kill him, and Immortal basically demanding for Invincible to kill him because Immortal has done terrible things and he wishes to die. Now, Invincible having that strict moral code of not killing anyone or not killing anybody else or believing he's killed anyone else after Angstrom Levy is quite extreme. So by him not killing Immortal, as Immortal says himself, is causing much greater harm within the future. That's pretty hypocritical. And Mark is also faced with the reality that he's the one that put Immortal in this position. Well, not him directly, but his future self is the one that left Immortal in charge of Earth and caused him to lose his mind by basically making him live to death. And Invincible only acts at some point when Dropkick or Fightmaster, one of those two, is in danger of Immortal killing them. That's when he finally decides to do the deed and finally put the Immortal to rest. My conclusion on the guy is it was a great stepping stone for Mark in realizing that the world isn't sunshine and rainbows, and you will end up having to kill people in this line of work. Because if you don't, there can be massive, dire consequences. And in the immortal words of Abraham Lincoln, whatever you do, be a good one. We're now into honourable mention territory. First of all, I want to say, William, why the hell are you screwing over your bro and bringing his ex to your birthday party and then accusing him of being the one that isn't an adult? I'm not going to lie to you, that's a bit of a dick move. Next up, we have the gay bank robbers attempting to go straight. I'm not proud of that one. So this story is an absolute masterpiece in short time. It shows a couple that are committing crimes together and robbing banks, and eventually the testicle tyrant decides that he no longer wants to do that type of stuff after looking at a young girl being afraid of him. So these two decide to break away from their life of crime and start making good by making an honest living. Now, this is a really good story for the short time that it's on, and it also makes you truly think about the people that are forced into this type of life. We already had that side from Titan, but it's really good to see that he's not the only case and everyone is going through their own individual struggles. Now, these two are stuck in their own kind of downward spiral because it's quite obvious that after living the life that they've lived, finding honest work is probably not the easiest thing in the world to do. And also, they've probably got pretty abrasive personalities from what they've been doing previously, and that ends up with them getting fired after the Mag Maniac uses his powers to charcoal up some burgers. This is the first event that basically kicks off the domino fall that ends up with these two being on the streets and then forcing back into a life of crime. It's really quite sad because you actually see them finally smile at each other once they're back doing what they love to do, even though they tried the honest way. It just shows that people stuck in this kind of cycle really, truly are stuck. Now, call it what you want, but I can't imagine getting out of prison is an easy thing to do for finding work. But in this world, I can imagine it's 10 times harder if you're a flippin' supervillain. I made a whole video on Rex's funeral and why it was disappointing, and I'll still say now it's the only part of this series that I actually dislike.
Hello there.
Now, Rex did the most selfless thing in the end to complete his arc, which was self-sacrifice. Before then, it was building up to the point where he was becoming more of a man and more of a hero, opposed to the selfish, superpowered individual we met him in the beginning. Either way, rest in peace, Rex, and hopefully I don't bring you back just to ruin you.
You may not be where you want to be yet in life, but you're also not where you used to be. Take a second to realize how far you've come. Now put your head down and get back to killing it.
Now onto the final slaying Mantis layer. I don't know why I found that joke so funny, I just do. Anyway, we're on to Oliver. Oliver could have an entire video by himself. Now, how can I describe Oliver? Well, he's half Thraxan, half Viltrumite, so he's kind of a bug child that's purple, which means that his life already isn't normal on Earth. And he has a memory that lasts forever. And all that being said, apart from him being like a normal little boy, he's probably also the coldest, most brutal motherfucker in the show, bar maybe Conquest. Oliver and Cecil have a few similarities as well, and the show seems to want to hint that to us quietly. When Cecil and Oliver are having a conversation on the doorstep, Cecil remarks that Oliver missed a spot, pointing to the patch of skin on his face that was still purple. Now, Cecil's iconic scar, which we now know is the only piece of his actual skin remaining, that's also Oliver's last piece of skin remaining, and it's even on the same fucking side. Oliver's mentality seems to be a bit of a pragmatic consequentialist with some authoritarian tendencies. If that sounded a bit like a word salad there, I'll break it down for you. Pragmatic basically just means logical. Consequentialist, we were chatting about that before, basically just means ends justify the means. Authoritarian is strict rules and regs over individual freedom, and tendencies is just like stuff that you do. Wow, that was pretty easy. We first see glimpses of this when Oliver's dying to get into fights and ends up taking on the Maulers. Now, him jumping through the first Mauler, yeah, that could have just been a bit of an accident, a kid not knowing his own strength. But the first thing he does is turn around and remarks, "That's what you get for being a bad guy." Now, I might be paraphrasing a bit there, but that sounded like he had some serious vitriol in what he said. Now, I think this genuinely seemed quite real to me because I've been in a fight where, or fights, when I've been genuinely trying to back down and defuse the whole thing, but the other party wouldn't leave me alone. And after I've seriously hurt them, I've said some pretty messed up shit to them. And that's who I like to think I am. I'm not really, but sometimes that happens. Anyhow, we also notice that the second Mauler surrenders before Oliver finally puts him down, and this was confirmed to Mark by the Immortal. Oliver later doubles down after Invincible catches up to him and challenges Mark's worldview and saying, "Do you ever think Dad might have been right?" The longest time ever, he was believing that his dad was a horrible, monstrous Viltrumite, which is also very true. Bear in mind, Oliver didn't go through what Mark went through, but still enough that I think that Mark actually did pause for a second and think about it. Later, we come to a moment where Oliver and Atom Eve and Mark are sat on top of a building after they're discussing his fight with Rhino. This also comes after Atom Eve remarks to Oliver about not destroying people's random property, which she told Paraplex that. Anyway, Oliver then talks about how Nolan used to fly him around the palace, and that's how he remembers his dad. And then he says something that's really quite interesting. He says he never had the chance to apologize, so he's just a bad guy forever. Excuse me, you little hypocritical fuck. Do you not think the same thing about the Mauler twins, maybe? Nah, maybe they don't matter because they're not your daddy. Apart from Oliver's direct bias towards his dad, Oliver is in a strict conflict in morals towards Mark, and Mark believes in redemption, whereas Oliver straight up believes in elimination. This is a bit of an interesting juxtaposition, there's another big word, because Oliver is probably not even a year old yet. I mean, he's presenting about as a 7, 8-year-old child, and it is even stranger because Oliver genuinely doesn't do it because he enjoys killing things. Far from that. Oliver does this because he genuinely believes he's doing the right thing. That makes him absolutely terrifying. My final verdict on Oliver is, even though he's a child, You're slowly becoming a bit of a morally grey enforcer of order. Somewhere kind of in between Mark and his father. And this is going to start really pushing Mark's belief in second chances and forcing him to confront whether idealism can survive in the relentless universe that they're in. Video essays, they take feckin' forever. Right, I want to thank you guys for getting through that. Also, my Damien Darkblood video got about 600 views, and I'm well and truly over the moon. I'm amazed that as many people liked it, and people leaving really nice comments on it. It's genuinely quite surprising because I just did this as a hobby because it was funny, really. And now it's actually turned out that people are enjoying my stuff and want to see more of it. So I'm very much blown away. And to the 7 subscriber, no, I won't forget about you. I reckon I'll come back and I'll revisit that video every now and again. And our relationship will be fully parasocial, I promise. Anyway, if you want to see me continuing this journey, or if you just want to make fun of the fact that I always say no or anything like that, I'm all for it. The next video, I'm thinking I'm going to tackle the latest season of Cobra Kai. There's just a few things I want to do on that. It'll probably be a bit more short form than this one. This video did take a bit of planning and a bit of re-editing and revoicing all the way through. As you can probably tell, I sound a bit raspy. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing this. And if you want to rip on us, or if you want to say some nice stuff, or if you want to correct me on little things I missed out, then more than welcome to down in the comments. And when I get the chance, I'll redo that Cecil video. I'm really not proud of it. I want to expand on it a bit more. Anyway, ciao Bella.